If you look back throughout your illustrious career, what would you consider your greatest moment, your greatest victory, your greatest triumph?
Well, that has to be the 1975 World Championship run that was decided at Ontario, California. It was a very contentious race. The NHRA was not happy with me winning the race because, well, I've had problems with NHRA. I put that PRO race right on top of the Nationals in 1972 and paid $25,000 to win Pro Stock, Funny Car, and Top Fuel. And it really changed everything. They had to get off their keisters and start paying some serious money. The race before at Indy, Steve Carbone won $3,000 when he won the race, the U.S. Nationals. And I told Wally at a winter banquet up in Atlanta, I says, Wally, the races should pay $25,000. He says it'll be light years before they pay $25,000. I says, no, I'll just have a race myself next year and pay $25,000. He looked at me like I was crazy. And so that's what I did. And we paid everybody. And we had that race for several years. But the first one was right on top of the U.S. Nationals. And it was really grim. The stands didn't have a lot of people in them. And they barely had the 16 cars. And they never forgot that. And so here we're having this big, just a few years later, we have their first big world championships, which was, all the races and the points. That was the first time they'd done it. NHRA had done that for years ahead of them. They had the world championship like that, the points all through the year. But now NHRA was having one. It was a big payout. And me and Beck was running nip and tuck the whole time. And we both had contracts to be at the IHRA finals in Bristol, Tennessee. And then the next race would be the world finals for the NHRA. And me and Beck were 1 and 2 in the IHRA. And the IHRA rule was if you didn't appear at the last race, you didn't get any points. You had to appear at the final race to validate your points. And we were both under contract. NHRA made up a new national event out of the clear blue sky for Seattle, Washington, the Fall Nationals. And of course, Gary voided his contract at Bristol and went out to Seattle and won the race because there wasn't hardly anybody there. Everybody was at the World Finals for IHRA. Of course, I won the IHRA race and won my championship. Anyway, long story short, we go into Ontario, California. I'm 450 points down. It was numerically possible to win by setting both ends of the world record and hold that record when the meet was over and win the event. If I did that, I would barely win the championship. Well, the record was already 249.30, and we just didn't seem like anybody could get to 250. Everything we did, it didn't work. It slowed you down. That 249 seemed like there was some kind of a barrier there. Now, the ETs were okay. I had the record at 5.71, something like that. And then on the first day, on the first run, Gary Beck goes 569 for a new world record. But it wasn't backed up yet, but he would easily back it up. So now the papers were all saying it's over. Beck's going to be the champion. And we went to the motel that night. I already turned 249. And I had the record at 249.30. I did that again, and I had a 5.71 ET. And I told my wife I'm going to put the special motor in that I built for this race. I built a special motor, a more powerful motor. And I also had a special set of tires. I worked for Goodyear for years. I helped Goodyear get into drag racing. I did all the testing on their tires in the beginning. And to this day, I can't buy a Goodyear tire. When I want a Goodyear tire, I just call the factory and they send me whatever I want. And it's all new management. But they've never forgot. I really like that.
That's great.
I mean, you don't see that very often.
Yes. Yes.
And I haven't won a race in years and years. They send me all my tires for my electric car, everything. And they sell those tires. They don't give them to people.
That's great.
So anyway, at Indy of 1975, they said, we've made this special tire. We want you to take a look at it. And I looked at it, it was bigger. It was an inch taller than anything I'd ever seen. They said, why don't you take these with you and test them at some of the drag strips in your match races and see how you like them. And maybe there's something we might want to move into. And so I took them home and I pumped them up on the wheels and looked at them. They really looked like monsters. And so I took those tires to Ontario with me. And I bolted those tires on. And at the motel that night, we put the new motor in. And right off the trailer, at Saturday, it went 250.69 with a 5.63. The 250 was backed up by the 249, and the 563 was too far away from the 571. I was going to need another run to back that up. So, and it rained. We only got one run that day. So the next day was the race, and I'll never forget this as long as I live. You know who the Kentucky Moonshiners are?
Yeah.
Dale Funk and Robert Frakes.
Yeah.
You know, Dale Funk's a big, tough guy from the mountains. And he don't take no shit from nobody. It's the second round, and it's time to race them. And Dale Funk comes over. This is very emotional. He says, Big Daddy, what you want us to do? I said, what? He says, what do you want us to do? You want us to lose fire on the rollers, or you want me to red light? Or we know what the NHRA has been trying to do. Everybody knew. Every round of qualifying at that event, the competitor gave me whatever lane I wanted. Can you imagine that? I mean, the competitors liked me, and they knew that these purses they were getting, who caused it. I said, Dale, I don't know what you've ever heard about me, but I've never thrown a race. I want the best car to win. The tears just come out of his eyes. He says, Big Daddy, that's why you're my hero.
That's awesome.
Robert, put the nitro in it. The old man wants to race. And we run the fastest side-by-side in drag racing history. I ran a 565, and he ran a 571.
Man, that's why you are the greatest, Big Daddy. You're giving me chills.
And so my record was backed up then. So now I had both records backed up, and we're in the race. In the next round, Gary Beck got outrun by Herm Peterson, and I was the world champion. Didn't even have to go to the final. And then I outrun Herb in the final.
That's special. That is, passion is what moves the sport.
My movie that I wrote the movie, Top Fuel, and we think it's going to get produced. And that's where the movie ends in that race, because that was the greatest crowning one race deal in drag racing for me. I mean, it was so impossible to do it. It's almost like it was written in Hollywood, and then we took it out there and produced it. I mean, there's a lot of other things I've done. You know, this museum is big. The rear engine car is really an accomplishment, because I didn't invent it. There was rear engine cars. Ollie Morris had one with a flathead dragster back in the White Owl, way back there in the 50s. A nice little car. But once we got these powerful motors, you couldn't drive them. They were all over the drag strip. And guys got killed in them. Red Chase got killed in a rear engine car in 58. So they've been around forever. And I almost didn't get this done. 3 months into the program, I hadn't made a run. Every run, it ran off the drag strip. And fortunately, I was doing it at Bithlow, the Orlando track, and the guardrails were 100 feet from the edge of the track, way over by the spectators. Today, with the way they have them now, you couldn't do it. You'd hit the wall 2 or 3 times. That's it. You know, to be done with it.
Sure.
And 3 months we tested and never made a run. We put the car over to the side at the shop, put a tarp over it, and we snapped together Swamp Rat 15, a slingshot, the nicest one ever built. It's hanging in the Summit showroom in McDonough, Georgia. Never made a run. And I was putting the finishing touches on the body, and my wife come out in the shop. She says, "What is that?" She knew what it was. I said, "That's my car for 1971." I says, "In 2 weeks, I got to be in Long Beach. My NHRA contract was $100,000, $10,000 a race for 10 races, guaranteed." And they was looking for me to protect that purse a lot of times, and I did. But I got 10,000 every time, no matter. In many of the races, I protected the purse. I saved it. And she says, "You would get back in one of those things after it's mutilated you like it has?" I said, "Honey, this is what I do." I says, "There's no transmission in this car, and that's what hurt me." She says, "No transmission, huh?" She says, "What about Sorokin? Did he have a transmission? Did John Mulligan have a transmission? Did Pete Robinson have a transmission?" I said, "No." She says, "Get back on that rear engine car." She says, if you don't do it for yourself, do it for your friends."
Well, that's outstanding.
Oh, she was a little wildcat.
Well,
and we got back on that car. We went over to Bithlow, and of course, it ran off the track again, And coming back from Bithlow, I was riding along like this, And I said, if I didn't know better, I think the steering was too fast. But that can't be it, because the steering is just exactly like the steering we had on the slingshot. And the slingshot goes perfect. And Swingle said, "But Gar, it ain't a slingshot, it's a front driver. If you think the steering's too fast, let's slow it down." So that night we lengthened the spindle arms and shortened the pitman arm on the steering box. It didn't have rack and pinion in it. We had the steering box way up front. Went to Bithlow, straight as an arrow. I'll never forget the run. What would happen? You'd be going down the track and it'd kind of move out of the groove a little bit. You just barely touch it to move it out back. It just turned like that. Or whichever way you happen to want to turn it, it just go that way. And I'm going down a bit, and I'm just, you just any minute you're ready to go off the track. It moved out of the groove just a tiny little bit, and I just touched it and just come right back. I couldn't believe it. I mean, it did just exactly what I told it to do. And the track record was 6.85 by the Ram Chargers. And this car just went 6.86 on 75% nitro. We had a winner. Went to California and didn't win the first race, the AHRA race, because it was the same track, the same lane, the same event, the same time of day as the year before when I blew my foot off. And I stepped on it when the light went green, and just as I stepped on it, saw the whole flash all over again. I just, like that, and Cochran was out. And it pulled right up to him, but I couldn't get him. But I won the Winter Nationals, and I won the U.S. Fuel and Gas Championships. But it still wasn't that much faster. It was just, it was good. It was as good as anybody there, but not the best. And it was, my driving ability was part of the reason I won those two races.